Thank you for joining us. This is Brave New History. We're talking with James Bean about Satmat and meditation. Thank you so much for coming and teaching us about Satmat.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. One of my favorite topics.
Yep, absolutely. And your YouTube channel is the same name, Satmat, right?
Satmat Radhaswamy, which is good for search. It's not so much good for spelling if you don't know how to spell Radhaswamy, but it's kind of good for the search results. SantMatRadhaswamy. At YouTube.
Yeah, and I'm sure the algorithm will say, "Did you mean Radhaswamy?" Right? If you misspell it.
Yeah, or if you type in Spiritual Awakening Radio, James Bean in the search box at YouTube, you'll come right to it.
Yep, good deal.
Or even Satmat, you'll probably see my photo there, just typing in Satmat, One of the few channels there are in the Satmat category. So
I've noticed that.
Yeah, less competition. It's less than, in Gnosticism, you've got scores and scores of people, but it's a smaller population for Satmat.
Yeah. Which, along those lines, we see a lot of parallels with Gnosticism. And one thing that, because Dr. D.M. Lane?
Andrea D.M. Lane, Dave Lane's wife. Yes.
Yeah. She wrote a book on that. I think it was her thesis about the similarities between Gnosticism and Satmat.
Yeah, the Gnostic mystery, and it's still one of the best books I think on Gnosticism that's ever been written. It's fairly short. It goes beyond a lot of the other academic type books out there, which just talks about dead people who were heretics. They used to be in Egypt, and now we have some of their writings. And they're really a weird bunch of people, and who knows? And the church didn't like them very much. The church says this about them. The church says that about them. The Ku Klux Klan says this about, and so it's like, of course, not too many good Yelp reviews from the Orthodox, from Bishop Irenaeus of the Gnostics. But, here with this book, The Gnostic Mystery by Andrea Grace Diem, is someone who is a practitioner of meditation and approaches the Gnostics with an eye for what it really is to be a Gnostic. What is the goal of being a Gnostic? Why were they doing the practice they were doing? And so, it's a great book about the Gnostics, their diet, their beliefs, their goals, their cosmology, treating it like a legitimate world religion, like Jainism, Buddhism, or some other path, rather than these weird people that the church thought were heretics. And that's it. That's, So you get used to that. But it's really weird to think of a religion as being defined by its enemies in antiquity, rather than approaching it on its own terms, like Jainism or Buddhism or some other path, where you look at their scriptures and see what their beliefs are, and don't really ask other people, well, what do the arch enemies think of the Jains, or what does their nemesis think about them? Nah, you don't do that. You just learn directly about them from them. And the Gnostic Mystery is one of those pleasant books. Hans Jonas, The Gnostic Religion, that was a good one also. That's an old textbook on Gnosticism. That has a bit of a spiritual streak to it, spiritual side.
And in it, which is new for me, that some of the Gnostics believed kind of as in Satmat, that there's these worlds up above, right, guarded by an archon or whatnot, and you kind of go through it, which I think is hinted at, right, in Paul, one of the epistles where he goes up to the third heaven.
Yes, heard things he was unable to reveal, secrets he could not disclose about the
just
third
like in Satmat, right?
Yes.
Unlawful to be revealed.
Right. Yeah. When you place the New Testament along with the apocryphal New Testament writings together, you see that they had a belief in the seven heavens. And the third heaven was called Paradise by Paul. And in the book of Second Enoch, the third heaven is also called Paradise, probably not a coincidence.
Yeah.
In their system of the heavens. So yeah, that's a very old concept, the ascension of the soul through the seven heavens on the way back to God, described as being in the eighth heaven or in the realm beyond the heavens.
Interesting.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's an old idea practiced by many. Whole concept of viewing cosmology, physical plane, and then intermediary, not so good levels that are supernatural, but not necessarily spiritual, like war in heaven. You find that in the book of Revelation. War in heaven? What? People don't think of war being in heaven. But in the lower heavens, anything goes. Kind of the astral nether region, if you will. Place of ghosts and gray alien abduction being entities and whatever else is there. And only the higher heavens are pure and spiritual. And in Gnostic systems, there's quite often a mention of the eighth or eighth heaven. And in Satmat, beyond the seven planes is the eighth, which is the true heaven, the eternal, timeless realm, called
Barbello. Yeah.
Or Anami Desh, or terms like that for the most high heaven above the others. And so the ascension of the soul is through these lower planes and not to be detained by false peak experiences or being bedazzled or detoured along the way in these lower realms. And that's also true of the Mandaeans. Over the winter, I bought the Mandaean scriptures, the Ginza Rabba, and there's a great story in there. I posted it online about this soul traveling through the different heavens. Realm number one, nope, not going to stay here. Realm number two, nope, this is not for me. Realm number three, and same thing. And then he gets to heaven number seven, and then just beyond the seventh heaven is the true realm of what is it called again? The Great Life, or Heyi Rabi in Mandaic Aramaic. Heyi Rabi, the Great Life, the place of the light, as the true realm. So that's an old idea that goes way back to antiquity. So, and is still taught by Satmat, and you'll find it in Sufism as well, and Kabbalah. They all have their own versions of that same, Kabbalah tree of life, inner realms, belief in the inner realms as part of the journey.
Yeah, and the designs look pretty similar, which Dr. Lane points that out. Like, there are diagrams of it where you wonder if are they interborrowing, or maybe they're just all experiencing the same thing.
I think it's a mix of both. Inner experiencers, like near-death people, coming up with similar or parallel stories. But I think there's also cultural influence between East and West, between Gnostics and Sufis, Christian mystics and Sufism, and Sufis go to India and influence people there. Manichaeans in India too, I think. Or that's my pet theory, that there was a Manichaean influence going on too that was substantial, although I haven't really documented it or found evidence for it.
Yeah.
So I think there's actually both influence back and forth, east to west. But also people practice and discover the inner realms. There's kind of a consensus. Yeah, lower realms are darker, and it gets brighter and brighter as you go up the tunnel toward the light. It's kind of a classic thing. East and west.
Yeah, which I get, it makes intuitive sense. Like, the sun is in the sky, and it's not beneath the earth. So, like, at least in terms of a metaphor, it makes sense, right?
As above, so below. Yeah. In fact, there are a lot of parallels, I think, between astronomy and mysticism, sun, moon, stars, and black holes. And I spend as much time listening to astronomy and space related podcasts and YouTube channels as I do spiritual ones. And just love finding out what's going on in the mysticism of the outer heavens, what's going on, the blobs of light, strange things, in orbit around the black hole in the center of the galaxy, and all the latest discoveries, observations, and looking forward to more telescopes and UAP observatories trying to bring into view things that have been there but have been sort of invisible to the naked eye for the most part. So mysticism of inner space, mysticism of outer space, as above, so below, both are fascinating.
Yeah. So how do we get to this eighth heaven?
It's a gradual process of meditation, learning the way of meditation by way of the third eye center, developing one's spiritual practice, and then just keeping at it for the rest of one's life. And, may take more than one lifetime, who knows? But you always come back to where you left off. So it's all about the spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. So as with astronomy, you take the lens off the telescope and gaze, you focus in a specific direction to look for whatever you're looking for a star, galaxy, whatever it might be. And the equivalent in meditation is focusing at the third eye center. That's the true lens within to gaze with and focus. Soul travel is basically about focusing your attention, and anything that you see, you focus, certain things you focus on for lights, certain sounds you focus upon, and that is your means of transportation. Everything is about focusing your attention, and then it becomes enlivened, becomes more real to you, becomes bigger, clearer, brighter, sharper, and may lead to other experiences beyond that. So attention, the term surat is used in India. Surat Shabad Yoga, the attention faculty of the soul, focusing on the positive power of light and sound and becoming yoked to it, or what the word yoga means, so yoked or becoming in union with. So the focus of the attention of the soul being yoked to the Shabda, the Shabad Nam, the positive power, which can be seen or heard, or both. And then focusing your attention, and it will lead to more and more visionary and auditory experiences. I like what David Lane, how he described it in the book Enchanted Land, where he describes Surat Shabad Yoga as being a conscious near-death experience. You're consciously, in a more gradual sort of way, attempting to make that journey.
Yeah.
Near death, out of body, but it's actually a bit of an out of body, or OOBE is kind of a misnomer, because it's really within the body, or within, ascension from within, by way of the third eye, then the crown chakra and subtle bodies, planes above. So a within and up. Whereas the old Catholic way was flat earth and dome and stuff physically above. I remember when I first started my spiritual search, I read this book, Confessions of Jacob Boehme, or Jacob Boehme, a medieval German cobbler. And he was saying the heavens are not physically up and hells are not physically down, like in the crust of the earth somewhere. It's all around us, kind of what we would now say like radio waves, or other frequencies accessible, not physically up or down.
Yeah, that does sound familiar, doesn't it? That don't look to the sky, because the birds will precede you, right? And don't look below, or the fish will precede you. Yeah.
Yeah, the Gospel of Thomas, very much like Kabir, made fun of a lot of level confusion type things, heavens being physical and up.
Mm-hmm.
And so the birds, which are not being misled by bad religions, are actually going to get there sooner, probably. Yeah, that's a very Kabir-like saying of Jesus saying 3, Gospel of Thomas. The birds of the sky will get there before you do.
And I forget the exact quote, although it's, well, when will the kingdom of heaven arrive?
Oh, it's
And
always like in Thomas, it's always like it's already here. You just don't
exactly.
recognize it. You're not seeing it. It's spread out upon the earth. But alas, people don't see it. It's always, when will the resurrection of the dead take place? What you look forward to has already come, but you don't know it. 24 prophets in Israel spoke of you, and they all said good things. Typical Christian Bible prophecy speculation 101. And the reply is, no. There's the living one right in front of you right now, in the present moment. And it's always about recognizing what you're not recognizing, coming to see what you don't see here now. Never mind the prophets and the prophecies and the what we used to call the Hal Lindsey, or the prophets and the in 1974 someone writes Henry Kissinger is the Antichrist. His name adds up to 666 and all this. If you want to know if a prophet is true, don't read his predictions for next year. Read about his predictions for last year. It's all a waste of time. Prophecy in Thomas and in the mystic tradition is sort of part of the problem, not part of the solution. It's always a waste of time. It's always another distraction by those who are asleep, caught up in the matrix, including the religious matrix. Thomas makes fun of prophecies and future tense kingdoms coming from the sky and stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting book.
Yeah,
my favorite gospel.
Yeah, I mean, it's top up there. I mean, maybe, well, Mary Magdalene is pretty good, but so much of it is lost. And I'm lost when I'm reading it too. That
it's an interesting text, what we have of it. I almost think saying 114 of the Gospel of Thomas, which talks about Mary, is kind of a segue in I imagine somebody with a collection of early Gospels, and Mary would come next in their collection. And so saying 114 is like a segue. And then when you turn the page, parchment, I guess, then it would be Gospel of Mary would be coming next in their collection.
Yeah, I've not understood that last Logion. It just seems so weird, right? With it says, I can probably hardly repeat it on YouTube because maybe, but basically against
it
women.
Sounds sexist to the modern ear. Now, at the time, it was progressive. Jesus is portrayed as having a lot of female followers and was very inclusive of women. But we might find that language offensive now, like women have souls too. Okay, great. That's something that we don't argue about in the modern world, but as for in ancient times, it may have been a bit different. And so, it's a weird saying, but I always like to point out that in the end, Jesus has his way and prevails, and Mary is invited into the inner circle. Peter was against that, and in fact, that's kind of a thing in other texts as well. Peter is always against Mary and is arguing with Mary across the pages of various apocryphal gospels. Pista Sophia, Gospel of Mary, it's always Peter that's saying, no, why are we letting her in? Why are we including her? Or in the Gospel of Mary, also is arguing against her revelation. Like, how is it that she knows things that we don't know? So it's kind of like Peter is the code word for Orthodox believer. And Mary is kind of a code name for maybe the Gnostic soul or the more mystically inclined Christian. And Peter is saying, I don't know about this stuff. And Peter still is to this day saying the same thing, so to speak, in the world of conservative religions, fundamentalist religions. Peter is still saying, I don't know about that, those teachings that Mary is espousing.
Yeah.
So that's very consistent throughout time.
Yeah. And that whole, Mary thing with sin is done away with, that
Right.
that you don't bind yourself by laws.
Right.
Or
They had a different approach. They were struggling with what to do with the Torah and how close or far from Judaism to be. And that was like a burning question for a few centuries. With the new nature, you have your natural inclinations that are good. And so you don't really need regulation, they're saying. But that was a huge debate. Yeah, what to do with the law. I've always been very kind of friendly toward teachings like Saturday is the Sabbath and the feast days have teachings to reveal. Ebionites, well, I'm very pro Ebionite as being James the Just. He's the one. But they were of course Torah observant, still a sect within Judaism. But yeah, I've always been kind of open to that. There are other factions of Christianity that teach that that's legalistic. It's under the law to go to a meeting on Saturday. But, most of the people that go to meetings on Sunday are legalistic too and are under the law and they've got their own problems. So I've never seen that as a very valid argument. So I've always had a soft spot for those Sabbath keeping, neo-Jewish Christian, or attempting to be Jewish Christian, or they might be using the term Essene these days to describe themselves, Essene Christians. I think Ebionite is a more accurate term, or Nazarene, or Nazare might be more accurate. But I was curious about those folks, the originals, the original church before Paul, and what their beliefs were, and all of that. I've tried to collect their writings, what writings of them survive. In fact, I think I might even do a podcast at some point with a title like, So You Want to Become an Essene Christian? What scriptures do you read? Something like that. I would say Gospel of the Hebrews, Gospel of Thomas, which has saying 12 in there, which, shouts out to James the Just as being the successor. Odes of Solomon. I'm a big fan of this book called the Odes of Solomon, which is a very early collection of Christian psalms, or some Jewish psalms with modifications by early Christians, maybe. That's a very important text. And of course, the Clementine literature is very key and pro-vegetarian. Maybe the Didache, and Sayings Gospel Q as reconstructed by various scholars. That's an important one. So, yeah, I guess it would include those, maybe some other things too. A Book of Barnabas. And those 3 Nag Hammadi books that are attributed to James, you might want to include those too. But we do digress.
Yes. So we want to know exactly the way to do this meditation so we can get to the 8th heaven.
Get there from here.
What's that?
To get there from here.
Exactly. So it's my understanding you start, maybe we might lose people here, but you got to be vegetarian.
There are requirements in order to qualify for initiation to follow Sant Mat. One of them would be following a lacto-vegetarianism. I actually am an advocate for being vegan, but veganism is not a requirement for initiation. I just think personally it's a good idea, and talk about it sometimes. But yeah, lacto-vegetarian diet, which means dairy is okay, but eggs are not. A diet which it favors including eggs would be called lacto-ovo. In Satmat, it's lacto-vegetarian, which means dairy is okay, but no meat, no fish, no fowl, no meat whatsoever, is a requirement just to get started, just to qualify.
And no alcohol.
No alcohol, no intoxicants as well, no recreational type drugs or intoxicants in Satmat. But Satmat is not anti-medicine or medicinal or anti-vax or any of those things. So if someone's taking something for depression or whatever it might be, totally fine, totally fine. Just a matter of no recreational or, intoxicant substances.
Yeah. And it means like no beer every other month or anything like that.
Right. That's it. No alcohol whatsoever. And people, with some of these things, people may struggle and phase them out over time. I know with diet, quite often people will drop, one kind of meat and then drop another and then eventually get there. So however you can arrive.
Yeah. I found it easier to give it up all at once. It was a lot easier than I thought, right? So I just,
wow.
I don't know, maybe it was the same way for you. You just one day.
Well, for me, I was very gradually transitioning. So a long time ago, I was actually kosher and eventually adopted Satmat. So that was lacto-veg. So no hamburger on the way to satsang, but completely giving up all meat whatsoever, 100%. And going vegan, the last thing to go is cheese, I think. But you can buy vegan cheese now. So
Back in my day, the vegan cheese was just terrible, and they still have the terrible vegan cheese. I don't know why.
That's true.
So if you want the terrible stuff, it's still available.
Yeah, lots of fake meats, lots of fake cheeses, and fake everything these days.
Yeah,
in an attempt to duplicate the experience of whatever it is, bacon without actually eating bacon, or you can do that if you really want to.
Yeah,
I find it to be all highly processed and high salt, high fat, not necessarily super healthy, but they offer that to try and wean people off of eating meat as the goal to popularize veganism. So
yeah,
whether it's vegan donuts, whatever it takes, right? They're just offering all of these products.
Yeah, and even Burger King, they have the Impossible Whopper.
Yeah.
And
for 10 years ago, they had a veggie burger at Burger King.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were like one of the first to do that.
Yeah, and you can still get I think they have the Impossible, what's the other? There's another sandwich that they're famous for. And they actually market it with bacon, right? So it's kind of like a gradual thing. You'd think, why would you do the Impossible Whopper with bacon? Kind of defeats the whole purpose.
That's sort of like destroying. Yeah, for your true vegan, they're going to say no real bacon with my veggie burger. Thank you very much. So, yeah. But they're trying. So
yeah, it's gradual, right? Like trying to health up the menu, I think, and
right. Yeah,
because
they're making an attempt. They're making an attempt, and by the time the ice caps are completely melted, maybe a lot of people will be vegan by then.
Yeah, hopefully sooner, right?
Too late, too little, too late, but they'll get there.
Yeah, there you go. And so, no alcohol. You're vegetarian.
Right.
Anything else that's a must?
Let me see. I have a page on my website. I'll even click on it and go there as we're speaking. Hopefully without logging off this page. Spiritualawakeningradio.com. and it's the Satmat page. So spiritualawakeningradio.com/Sant-Mot. And I have it's an introductory page, Introduction to Sant-Mot. And one of the tabs goes to moral requirements to qualify for initiation. 1, abstinence from alcohol and drugs, intoxicants. 2, ahimsa, nonviolence in thought, word, and deed, including in the area of diet, as in following a lacto-vegetarian diet. 3, leading a truthful life, just practicing truthfulness, or satya, the Indian word, satya. 4, practicing non-stealing, in other words, an ethical, honest source of income. And 5 is loyalty to one's spouse. And however you want to interpret that, not a promiscuous lifestyle. So yeah, those are the things.
Gotcha. And so let's say we tick off all those boxes, and then what?
Then there's no barrier to applying for initiation, and so it's a matter of a living master. Sant-Mot is, as with the ancient Gnostics, actually, only instead of Valentinus and his successor or someone else or their successor, in Sant-Mot there is a living teacher, a living one. And so a particular teacher, if you're drawn to a certain teacher, they're the one you're going to apply for initiation through. So the teacher, typically, people will be following the teachings of a certain living master, watch his videos, read his books, and those of his successors, and the previous masters in the same lineage. And so you're part of the group. The name of their meetups are known as satsangs, or spiritual gatherings. The Buddhists call them sanghas, and other Hindu groups use the word satsang. Sant-Mot uses the word Sant-Mot uses the term satsang for a gathering in the name of truth, or sat. And so people typically will be drawn to a certain teacher, however they happen to have heard about that teacher, and will attend the satsang or read books by that teacher. And then if they qualify for initiation, they're kind of into learning the meditation practice and don't have any heavy karma. The Sant-Mot lifestyle is fairly straight edge, so it's kind of a light karma lifestyle, not a lot of entanglements. And so you would apply for initiation through a living master and set that up. I mean, even these days, there are a few people that have gotten initiated via Skype, without having to travel anywhere whatsoever. But typically some people might travel to India. Some people might travel to wherever an initiation program might be taking place, wherever that is. And a few people by way of Skype, if they like that or are okay with that. And you learn the meditation. So initiation really means learning the meditation practice. The mysteries, being initiated into the mysteries of the kingdom of the heavens, to use an older language for that. You're learning the meditation practice, and that's the essence of it. You're influenced by your teacher, whoever your teacher is, and who is sort of a meditation coach to some extent, encouraging you to always keep at meditation, because meditation is always a thing where people fall off the wagon and start again, or, might practice for a while and then get distracted. And so by attending a satsang or reading a book by a living master, they're always going to say, do your Simran, do your meditation, keep at it. Don't forget, keep doing it. So it helps to motivate people. So even though Sant-Mot is a fairly solitary type path, a certain amount of community and connection, with a living teacher and with others on the path, maybe meditating with other people from time to time, going to a spiritual retreat occasionally, helps to keep you on the path, keeps you going.
And is the initiation, is this one and done? They teach you the names, how to meditate, and then that's it?
There are there are some differences. For most of the paths that people might encounter in North America, it is a single initiation. I know of some other paths, Sant paths in India, where they have two initiations. The first into light and Manas Jap or Simran, the sacred names, and a second initiation into sound. Once you start seeing light, then you say, "Hey, I'm seeing light now," so then you apply for the second initiation. But most of the paths associated with the lineage of Radha Swami, it's one initiation where you get the Simran or sacred names, Dhyan or meditation on inner light, and Surat Shabd Yoga or inner sound, with descriptions of the names, the markers, the visionary type lights you are especially looking for during meditation, as well as what sounds to focus on. And there are many sounds that one might hear in meditation, but some sounds are more special than others, more pulling or drawing than others. So they've got inner space mapped out, which is a neat thing. A kind of consensus as to what consciousness is like within, and different types of lights and sounds that you will encounter. In fact, even an atheist, if you put an atheist in a cave with no training whatsoever, they will probably stumble upon some degree of light, and might hear a ringing tone in the silence just by sensory deprivation. You put someone in a cave, take them off the street, they have no knowledge of Satmat or some related mystical path, put them in a cave. If they should, kind of settle down, they might accidentally discover light and sound on their own, just sitting quietly in the silence, in the darkness. So it's already, the masters teach that the light and sound are within everyone. It's just a matter of uncovering this reality going on, this unseen, as the Sufis call it, this unseen realm that's going on within, and learning how to access it. And that's, of course, another description of meditation.
Yeah. And how do you do it? You're in lotus pose in a dark room on a pillow.
You can, but you don't have to be in the lotus. You can just use your comfy chair, whatever it might be, sit on the edge of a chair or couch, or, whatever meditation posture you can maintain comfortably for a longer period of time without back pain or discomfort that would cause fidgeting, because that's always very distracting. So whatever you can do to be comfortable while sitting, that's all you need to do. And with eyes closed, I tend to like a darkened room that's quiet. So I kind of turn a certain room of my house into a cave on demand, and have a quiet place where I can meditate, quiet, dark place. The mystics of the world religions that reported seeing light, it was all a sensory deprivation kind of experience for them. They would get up early, 4 a.m, 3 a.m, while the world is dark and silent, and that's when they would do their meditation practice. So sensory deprivation is key, makes it very easy. So again, like with astronomy, you get up in the middle of the night, you point your telescope somewhere, and when it's dark, and that's when the subtle light comes through, in astronomy from the sky, or in mysticism, just with eyes closed when you do your practice, the light will appear course, in reality, the light is always there. It's just we are learning to tune into it through meditation practice and make use of the spiritual senses, spiritual seeing, spiritual hearing. And that's something written about, by other mystics too. I think Origen of Alexandria referred to the spiritual senses, and probably very few would know what that is or how to access it. But yeah, the eyes and ears of the soul, surit and nairit, spiritual seeing, spiritual hearing, can be accessed through meditation. So it's, you're staring at a blank void of darkness, waiting for the light to begin, waiting for the movie to start, waiting for something to start happening in that dark void that you're focusing on.
So could you be laying in bed?
You could. There's always the danger of falling asleep, of course, if you do. But there are also masters that teach people to fall asleep while meditating too, for like 3 or 4 minutes at the end of the day. And that's a good thing too. Maybe you can have satsang in the dream state if you do that. But typically you'd be sitting for meditation practice. But you can meditate lying down.
So
if you need to or want to.
Yeah, what do? You're like on a floor? You're in a
Just
chair?
in this office chair or another chair. Yeah, just I don't do any lotus posture. If you're from India and grow up with that, then that's very viable. But Westerners who've never done the lotus posture before, their veins have not grown in the right places. And then you try and do this. And this happens with Westerners a lot. They try sitting in a lotus posture for the very first time at the age of 37 or whatever it might be. And then their feet fall asleep and they're meditating on the lack of circulation in their feet. And so that's a great big distraction. So it does not help. If people grow up in India or, start from a young age and are comfortable with that posture, then wonderful. But yeah, you can just sit in a chair comfortably and, whatever works. Indians are really great at sitting on the floor. I mean, I see films and photos of Indians eating meals, just sitting on the floor. Their plate is literally just on the ground or on the floor. And they're okay with that. For me, it'd be like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do this. I'm on a table and a chair.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's kind of a cultural thing. So, yeah, the important thing is to not be distracted by trying out new postures for the first time and then wondering if you are going to have your feet amputated or not, or, inducing blood clots or, meditating on your feet, worried about your feet. So, yeah, you can just sit anywhere that you're comfortable. Office chair, gamer chair, whatever it might be, or a couch or a hassock or pillow, whatever works. That doesn't distract you or cause you to fidget or, induce back pain or, the idea is to be in a comfortable state for as long as possible without any distraction. So yeah, a nice comfy chair is just fine.
Yeah, and like head back, eyes closed, or you're just kind of like there, like holding yourself up?
Yeah, preferably with the spine straight, so you're at a state of focus. And slouched back in an easy chair, it's easy to just get out of focus or even doze off. So if you're sitting up straight, you're more at attention, more at focus, and that makes it better. With eyes closed, in a quiet time. You can meditate at any time, day or night, but most of the masters emphasize meditating early in the morning as being the ideal. Now, if you can't do the ideal, then it's meditate, whatever time of day works for you, certainly. The ideal in India is to get up at 3 a.m. The Sikhs call it Amrit Vela, the hour of elixir. The Hindus call it Brahma Muhurta, the hour of God, which is just a term for early in the morning before the sunrise, like 3 to 4 a.m. or someplace in that neighborhood, as the supreme ideal time to meditate. It's very quiet. But it's also good to not be legalistic about meditation. Like if someone says, I can't get up at 3 a.m, so therefore I will not meditate at all. And that would be like, no, that would be the wrong conclusion. So if you can meditate at 3 p.m, great, whatever time, and any time is a good time to meditate. If you're used to if you're able to meditate, if you can't do 3 a.m, then do 3 p.m. or in the evening, or anytime. Yeah. Whatever works. Or if you can't sit for a long time at once, meditate for a short time in the morning and then come back again and again, once or twice more. In fact, a few Satmat paths in India talk about thrice daily meditation. Meditate in the morning, some meditate in the afternoon or noon or middle of the day, and then again in the evening. So meditate 3 times a day. And others emphasize just a super long sit, whatever you can do to sit for the longest amount in one session. And there are merits to both. Mm-hmm. Merits to both approaches to meditation.
Yeah. And so you're there, and what are you focusing on?
With eyes closed, the dark veil in front of you, the darkness in front of you, with eyes closed. So I always prefer to meditate in a darkened room, turn the lights out. And in Satmat, we don't really care about ritual sorts of things, like candles or incense. Incense would make me sneeze and would be getting in the way of the meditation. So just a darkened room with eyes closed, staring into the dark void that is in front of you. And that's really a good definition of third eye. Mm-hmm. One doesn't have to worry about trying to locate their third eye on the outside. Between the eyebrows, isn't it in the forehead? Where is it exactly? But instead, just it was Kirpal Singh, I believe, who said, that which sees the darkness lying in front of you without the aid of your physical eyes is the third eye. And so, that's the third eye from the vantage point of within. You're able to look at the inner space, the dark void in front of you, with eyes closed, no external light whatsoever. And that is the third eye. That is the third eye vision.
And so you're there, you're looking into the darkness, and then eventually you'll hear bells?
That can happen too. Sparks of light or shimmering light or some kind of light may appear.
The bells generally come later? It's generally light?
Everyone is different. Everyone has a unique experience based on their background, history, karma, orientation. If people have meditated in a past life, it could very well be that you just come back to where you left off before. Whatever scene that was that you used to see, you'll start seeing it again, which is most intriguing. Bell sound or ringing tone is pretty common. That's described as the astral bell, which is more like a tone or a ringing that's going on. Not to be confused with tinnitus, which is always there whether you're meditating or not, whether you're reading the New York Times or not, or trying to meditate. Tinnitus can impinge, but the inner sound comes to you based on your attention, your focus in meditation, and then goes away again when you're done meditating on it. So that's different from tinnitus, thankfully. So yeah, the astral bell sound is the most common sound that most people might hear when they're first meditating. And that's even true in other paths too. There's this Buddhist teacher, Ajahn Samidu, who wrote a book called The Sound of Silence. And he says, there's this ringing tone going on all the time. Most people never notice it. And you can focus your attention on it and give you something to hang on to in the void. And it's very beneficial. And he teaches that in his Buddhist circle. He's a Buddhist teacher that teaches sound, at least at that level. He doesn't have a complicated cosmology of different planes, but he will advise people to listen to that ringing tone in the silence. He calls it the sound of silence meditation, or the Surangama Samadhi. It's a ringing tone, like someone has hit a bell, and it's just reverberating forever. Just that reverberation just goes on and on and on and on. And you can tune into it. You can focus on it in meditation. And that's what we mean by Sarit Shabad Yoga or Nada Yoga. You're just focusing on that sound as the be all and the end all. You're just really focusing on it, and it will sooner or later morph into other sounds. And those sounds will in turn morph into other sounds. There's a great book by Edward Salim Michael called Nada Yoga, The Law of Attention. It's at Amazon and other places. It's got a nice bright orange cover with a Buddha on the front. And he was an interesting sound mystic. I believe he was from France, and he went to India. I don't think he actually ran into Sant Mat, tragically, but I think he hung out with the various gurus and learned a little bit about Nada Yoga in India. And that's a very fine book on sound mysticism from a different tradition, different approach, without regard to, Sant Mat or a more complex map of inner space, but just working with inner sound. Yep. The Law of Attention, not Nada Yoga, The Law of Attention. And in that book, he describes his own experiences of like one sound morphing into another sound, becoming a kind of high-pitched, silvery, shimmering sound. And yeah, it's a very intriguing book. It's one of the few books from an outside source, not related to Sant Mat, that is speaking about sound. Sound is pretty rare these days. It has been taught in Sufism, and there are Christian mystics that reported it. It's in the Nag Hammadi. It's in other texts, but these days, it's pretty much Sant Mat exclusively. I was talking to the Sufi sheikh a few years ago, Kabir Helminski, who's translated some Rumi poetry, and I asked him, so do you meditate on sound in your Sufi order, the Mevlevi Sufi order? Tell us, do you meditate on sound? Because Rumi talked about the sound, and he was supposedly the founder of the Mevlevis. And Kabir Helminski said to me, there's this path called Sant Mat. You should check it out. So it's like, okay, full circle we come. I was hoping he would say, yes, it's a secret Sufi practice that the Mevlevis are still doing in the 21st century. But no, he said, yeah, check out Sant Mat. Sant Mat 101, 2 doors down. Go there.
And is there a origin that's explained as to where this ringing comes from?
The teaching about the sound, in the beginning, God. God said, let there be, and all became, or there was the Om, or in the beginning was the word, the Logos, the Tao, the Shabda, the Sati Sarmad, the song of the Creator. And then the sound morphs into different sounds as the various realms or universes or dimensions get created, kind of like throwing a pebble into a pond and it just the waves ripple out, or string theory as the case may be. You know, I love the Michio Kaku quotes about God is the musician playing the strings, super strings, the sound of God, you know, creating the universe or multiverses. And so the different sounds are associated with different realms, different heavens or levels, call them what you will, spheres. And so certain sounds are associated with certain stages of development and serve as markers along the way. And what we call these days the astral plane, or the first realm within, beyond the physical, that is fairly universally associated with the ringing sound, the bell, and also the conch shell, like someone blowing a conch shell. So, of course, these are all rough approximations. It's sort of like a bell, but in an altered state, kind of like underwater or in an altered state. So it's kind of wavy, you know, not exactly like a literal bell. And the same with these other instruments too, kind of conch shell-like, sitar-like, drum or thunder-like, but in an altered sort of state. But yeah, different sounds within, you know, are encountered and are associated with different realms as the predominant sound. Of course, there are many sounds in all realms, but certain sounds are considered more spiritual than others. Like crickets are meaningless. You know, crickets are another common sound, but that's considered like lower astral, you know, kind of like bottom of the sound, bottom plane. But the astral bell is considered more spiritual, something that will take you higher. So certain sounds are considered important to focus on. And that's part of the initiation. You know, you learn about what those sounds are, the realms they're associated with, the lights or visions. And so it's kind of a map of inner space, a literal inner path. The Path of the Masters is the name of a book by Julian P. Johnson, but it's also a place or a realm or state of consciousness would be more accurate. Within the Path of the Masters is this inner path of light and sound, and one is traversing the different realms of lights and sounds that are associated with the seven heavens, and making our way back to the timeless God realm beyond, called by various names: Anami Desh, Radhaswami Desh, Anurag Sagar, Ocean of Love, or Kavalya, the oneness. Goes by different names. And so it's a literal path within. So some masters have said Surat Shabd Yoga is a meditation practice created by God, not by man. It's just something that's within. It's already there. We just need to uncover it. So it's considered to be something naturally occurring in the cosmos, and we can access it. But the actual light and sound are considered, you know, part of the creation, you know, more so than something invented by a religious sect.
So you focus on a bell sound, and then it's kind of like you're ascending there, and then when, let's say, the bell sound is pretty loud, you're close, then there's another sound that you start hearing.
There are other sounds that you will hear, and actually many sounds that one might hear. And at the time of initiation, all of that is revealed, all as part of a package deal. The names are associated with the planes also. There are 5 names. Well, in most traditions, I mean, there are other forms of Satmat that don't use the 5 names, but have other sacred names. And they're all rather interesting, beautiful words. But basically, these names are associated with astral plane, causal plane, mental plane, etheric plane, and the first spiritual plane, what we call Satlok, which just is timeless, eternal realm, or the beginning of the divine realm. And so the names are associated with these higher regions, and you'll find in the Nag Hammadi library a sect, I believe scholars have given them the name Sethians,
Mm-hmm.
that in their writings, they had 5 special names also. Of course, back then, they were a lot of these Gnostic groups started off as baptismal sects. And so they would baptize people in rivers of water, flowing water, 5 times, once for each of these Hebrew names that they would initiate people into. And those names are associated with Gnostic heavens, Gnostic inner realms, and were considered passwords and words of protection against negative powers, just like in Satmat today. These are considered names that are like keys or passwords that let you through, and are names of protection and power. And the Gnostics were doing this, or the Sethians at least, and those related to them. And in the Nag Hammadi library, I think is it Trimorphic Proto-Noah, I think is one of the texts, and a couple of the others too. There are these 5 Gnostic names, 5 seals, 5 names associated with baptism, which is their term for initiation. Mm-hmm. And those are their special names. So it's interesting. You have the Nag Hammadi library, which is a collection of Coptic writings, but then these very Hebrew sounding names are found in there. So the Sethians are described as kind of a Jewish Gnostic group in antiquity, and their sacred names seem kind of related to Hebrew somehow, and corresponded to Gnostic realms. So same kind of idea. I think that's probably true in Kabbalah. I'm not very familiar with Kabbalah, but I believe they have Hebrew names that are associated with inner regions. So I think there are a lot of similarities with the mystics, the cousin schools of mysticism. And so, yeah, the 5 names in Satmat are key. And there are certain visions of light associated with each of those 5 realms, and certain sounds. And so you focus on the names and the lights and the sounds and begin this process of going within to have deeper and deeper meditations over time. And this is another way of describing the ascension of the soul as it learns to focus within and go further. And it can feel like a tunnel also. It starts off as a dark void, but the scenes change over time. Lights and sounds change over time. And so in a sense, it's like a tunnel. And you're just kind of tunneling through, traveling within. I like the term inner space a lot. The teacher Darshan Singh used that term a lot, wrote a book called The Wonders of Inner Space. And so Kingdom of God is okay, but, inner space, I think, is a more modern term that defines it better, inner space. And it too has its stars, suns, moons, blobs of light of various kinds. So that's why I'm fond of astronomy too. Astronomy is like mysticism of outer space, physical plane, traveling. Inner space is the place. So it's soul travel, if you will, or the attention faculty of the soul explores going further and further within, into this realm of lights and sounds. And the repetition of the names kind of gives you something to focus your attention on, or get, especially at first when you meditate. Now, at some point when you move to sound meditation, you drop the repetition of mantras altogether, and the sound becomes your mantra, You focus on the sound instead of doing this mental repetition of names. The sound becomes a higher kind of experience. So, yep, when you get to sound meditation practice, you no longer use the 5 names or whatever your mantra is. Yep, you just...
That explains there's 8 realms, but 5 names.
Right. Yes, there are more planes than 5. The 5th plane has been kind of divided into 4 realms, so it turns out to be a total of 8. With the top plane, at some point, the higher part of the top plane, called variously Anami or Radhaswami, you move out of the realm of light and sound altogether. So you go be. It's a kind of a weird thing. Wouldn't mind having a discussion with a teacher sometime. It's not just like no light, no sound. I mean, people can experience that already, and if they've never meditated before and they close their eyes, they can like not hear any sound and not see any light. So it's kind of different than that. You've passed through these veils and have gotten to this level that is beyond the light and sound, but is not really just quiet and silent and dark, but is the God state, which is described as being veiled by light and sound. By the light of Allah, I see Allah, is a Sufi saying, or verse, a surah of the Quran or something. So it's like God is veiled by lights and sounds. And then these lights and sounds at the end of the meditation process are also transcended. And then it's just God beyond light and sound. God is described as soundless by some masters in Satmat, soundlessness, or Enami, beyond Nam, or nameless, which is just also soundlessness, beyond sound. And so, as with a black hole in space, you slip beyond the event horizon and the rules change. At some point, you end up at a place beyond time, beyond the ordinary, space, normal space, and enter into this exotic, unknown realm that we speculate about.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens at the highest part of the 5th plane.
Yes, yeah, it's kind of, I like the idea of thinking of God as like a black hole, and you just at some point slip out of ordinary space-time and are someplace new, different, exotic, whatever it might be. Beyond, God is described as being veiled by light and sound. So those are not the ultimate either, but are just transitioning. The soul is using them to transition back to God again. So like other paths, oneness with God or union with God is the goal. In some traditions, they call that theosis or divinization. Mm-hmm. God became man so that man might become God. I think even Athanasius of Alexandria said that, but in his case, he had just applied it to one figure, whereas in Satmat, it's a description of any number of masters throughout history doing the same thing, becoming man in order to communicate teachings to humanity so that they might make this spiritual journey back to God again. So I think of the idea of living teachers as a way to describe how a formless supreme being communicates with souls that believe themselves to be in worlds of form, or caught in a matrix, to use the very often used analogy of the Matrix. Mm-hmm. Still, after all of these years since the films, we're in the Matrix. So how do you communicate? You have to communicate with people in some way. What's a formless supreme being to do? He assumes forms and sends forms, and hangs out with people that are living in worlds of form, time and space, and say there's this passageway whereby we might ascend back to the one again. And it's the way of the mystics, as defined by Sant. And in the past, I'm very fond of comparative religion and mysticism. I see others playing that role in previous millennia, centuries. Of course, we are acquainted with Jesus, but there's also Apollonius of Tyana, Pythagoras, and any number of interesting souls that seem to have been doing the same kind of thing long ago. And even sound. I mean, the music of the spheres is an interesting idea. Very influential old teaching that turns up. So there are passages. I found passages about sound mysticism in Gnostic and Hermetic sources. Syrian saints. A few years ago, I started studying some of those Syriac saints, Saint Isaac of Nineveh, Joseph the Visionary. That's like another lesser known form of Christianity. And those tend to be my favorite kind of Christianity. The ones we've never heard of, the Gospel of who's that again? Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Those tend to be interesting. And so the Syriac saints they're somewhat like the Orthodox, somewhat like Eastern Orthodox saints, a bit further to the east, a bit more ecstatic. And they too, some I've read about sound, and I think it's Bar Hebraeus was one of those saints. I was reading about sound, and sometimes they call it sound of the angels too, angelic sounds. That seems to come up in Christian traditions more frequently, bringing angels into the equation, or sounds that sound like they're from an angelic realm. So the light and sound teachings have been present in all of the world religions. It's just that in most world religions, in most paths, they don't have a surviving mystical branch. And so if you say, Meister Eckhart, if you weren't dead, I would ask you what your practice was. But now it's like speculation. Some say this, some say that. No one knows. No one cares. So there has to be a living tradition in order to learn a practice from, because the meditation practice is never written down. Did the disciples of Jesus chant IAO or Yahweh? Who knows, right? Who knows what they were into, what the sacred name was that they were referring to. And their practice is mostly just speculation. And many don't even believe that they had a practice, right? Conservative religions don't believe in a spiritual practice. They're looking for second comings and new dispensations to kick in the future or after death, or any place but now, any place but here, somewhere in the by and by. The birds in the sky once again. A living mystic tradition where the meditation instructions are conveyed. That's key in Sant, and has turned up in other paths too over the centuries. We consider in Sant Rumi to be a true master in the highest sense. Rumi, Hafez, a lot of those Sufi saints, Bulleh Shah, Hazrat Sultan Bahu. I mean, it's Sufism. And some say, well, wasn't Rumi halal, following a halal diet? People assume that. People assume that they were halal because Islam is. People assume the early Jesus movement is kosher because the synagogue across the street practices that in their Orthodox Judaism. But no, sometimes these paths had a different ethical tradition. There are actually vegan verses attributed to Rumi. There's this article in this Indian newspaper quoting a translation saying that Rumi was vegan, and I was most intrigued by that because I've always wondered, well, was Rumi halal? So how could he be a true master? How could he be, on the path? But then I find these vegan verses of Rumi. And then I read this article about Rabia of Basra, another famous Sufi mystic in Islam, 10th century AD, I believe. And she was advocating vegetarianism. And there's some vegetarian authors, that have quoted her, some stories associated with Rabia and animals that remind you of St. Francis of Assisi, surrounded by animals. So, as with Jesus, John the Baptist, and James the Just, surprise, there are some vegetarians in these world religions where you might not expect them to be. Most people are shocked to know about vegetarian references in early Christianity. But what about the fishes with the loaves? Mm-hmm. They'll say, well, yes, if you read Roman Gospels, but these people were Ebionite, Jewish Christians, part of a Jewish Christian sect, probably the great grandchildren of the Essenes, and they had a very different gospel of the Hebrews, and didn't have any. They were not okay with eating meat, and they described the apostles as vegetarians, which is surprising to a lot of people. It was surprising to me when I first started studying and looking into that, and I was always wondering about the Sufis, including Rumi, the great, king of the Sufi poets, the greatest of the Sufis. And then I find this collection of poems attributed to Rumi, where he is, this New Delhi Times article called him vegetarian, but he mentions, and for me, milk products are forbidden. So it's like, ding, ding, ding. Okay, we have reached veganhood for Rumi. Mm-hmm. Surprise. Yeah. And then John the Baptist too. I mean, he's got this reputation for eating locusts. And so I dug into, found all of these. I mean, even Bart Ehrman, fairly mainstream scholars, describing John the Baptist as being a vegetarian, eating this wilderness plant diet. And that's part of a Jewish tradition. And Gnostic texts that say that he was vegetarian and describe him. Josephus, Slavonic Josephus, which was more intended for a Jewish audience originally rather than a Roman audience. And so the Christians preserved this other version of Josephus's writings. And there's an actual quote from John the Baptist in there where he is saying that he is not a meat eater, that his diet was all plants. Which is very shocking, Mm-hmm. So there were Sufis who were vegetarian, and in the case of Rumi, actually vegan.
Yeah, which, I prefer vegetables to locusts too. They don't, I've never thought, that looks good.
Yeah. You can buy cricket powder on Amazon. If you wanted to, I'm just saying, you could. I mean,
if you wanted to,
I will never want to, but you can. I didn't know that. I looked it up. If you type in cricket powder at Amazon, sure enough, it's there. So that's weird. I have bought tofu through Amazon. I will fess up to that, but no cricket powder. Yeah, that's the locust thing. That was a mistranslation. Whether it was deliberate or not, or just like a Greek translator who was clueless about Middle Eastern tradition, because I mean, in the Middle East they have the Saint. They call it the St. John's tree. I mean, it's like people, like the locals, knew that it was carob trees being referred to by John the Baptist. Carob flour, you use carob beans to make carob flour, probably like this flatbread, some kind of Middle Eastern flatbread made from carob beans. But there's a Greek word that can be translated as carob, but is one letter. If you change one letter in the Greek, it becomes locust. In the case of the carob tree, sometimes they call it the locust tree, though. So that's even kind of tricky. They call it the locust tree, locust flower. And so the question is, did the translators deliberately want to turn John the Baptist into a bug eater, or were they just clueless and very distant, far removed from his tradition in the Transjordan, very far from that world? So yeah, there was a lot of vegetarians that are part of mystical paths over the centuries that get into light and sound. Vegetarianism is usually part of their path, even those paths that we might assume must have been halal or kosher. Sometimes they're veg too, and like in the case of Rumi and certain Sufis, at least, and the Jesus movement, whatever they were into. Certainly the Gnostics. I think the default, I don't think I have ever read about a non-vegetarian Gnostic sect. I think in the case of the Manichaeans of later centuries, they had like a twofold system, an outer circle where you might eat meat still and are kind of householders with a looser practice. But once you become an initiate and join that inner circle of the whatever they call themselves, there's the hearers of the word and the doers or something like that. When you get to that inner circle, even in the Manichaean religion, you have to be vegetarian. So even there, but as far as I'm aware, Valentinians, Sethians, vegetarian, and anything Gnostic were vegetarian. I'm not sure about the Carpocratians. They swing in a different way. I don't know about what they were into. But by default, Gnosticism I see as a vegetarian type path. And a good example of that is the Nag Hammadi library book called The Prayer of Thanksgiving, which sometimes I post on American Thanksgiving. The Prayer of Thanksgiving. And they, at the end of this prayer, they ate this love feast or agape meal of some sort that had no blood in it, no flesh, no flesh of animals. And so that is a very vegetarian. When you describe eating meat as eating flesh, meat eaters don't do that. They don't talk about corpse eating and flesh eating and stuff like that. But vegetarians definitely do. And in the Nag Hammadi scriptures, the Marvin Meyer translation of the Nag Hammadi, if you look at the footnote there at the end of the Prayer of Thanksgiving text, it says vegetarian meal. So that's right in the Nag Hammadi library, this reference to this vegetarian meal. And that particular prayer of Thanksgiving is also included in another collection of writings from Egypt. It's an example of a Nag Hammadi book that overlaps with another collection, the Hermetica. The same prayer is found in the Hermetic literature as well, and is also described as a vegetarian meal at the end of this long prayer. So, I think of Gnosticism as also being a vegetarian path. And don't know of any non-Gnostic vegetarians until you get into, and this is my beef, my gripe, and those European colonizing 19th century occultists that manhandle other people's religion, eat mummies, steal artifacts from Egypt, and play around with colonies. They, of course, omitted the vegetarianism in their neo-Gnosticism paths that they've written about. Those 19th century and 20th century occult neo-Gnostic kind of authors sometimes. They omit the vegetarian part, pick and choose, as colonizers that they were. What was good or not so good about other people's religions, and incorporate what to incorporate into their own religion. So there you'll start seeing people who call themselves Gnostics and or like anti-veg. That's when they come along. But yeah, I don't really think of them as Gnostics.
Mm-hmm.
Really. When I use the word Gnostic, I refer to the classic Gnostics. So people that might like the Nag Hammadi library or Pista Sophia or some of those writings. Not so much some of the 19th century or 20th century type groups, metaphysical, I don't know, occult something or another, which shall remain nameless, I suppose. But a lot of the modern day groups that use that word Gnostic, but may not even be into the Nag Hammadi at all. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to read the Nag Hammadi. I think of Nag Hammadi as being a collection of Gnostic texts. So if you call yourself Gnostic, you got to have a copy of the Nag Hammadi. So yeah, I think of Gnosticism as being a vegetarian path, at least according to them. And I think the Cathars of France too, I think they had kind of a similar to the Manichaean approach, an outer circle and an inner circle, and the inner circle was veg. But if you were not part of that inner circle of the perfected, then you had a looser standard, which might let it might become an ideal to become vegetarian. But that's actually a good approach. I certainly wasn't vegetarian when I first started studying spiritual paths, and it was a transition for me. So it's a transition. It may take a little while to transition, to learn. It's a different culture. This is an alien culture we're talking about here with these spiritual paths, or the concept of initiation. It's all very new and alien stuff. When I first heard about Satmat and that vegetarianism was a requirement, I kind of thought to myself, what? My third eye won't work as well if I eat meat? It seemed weird to me. And now it's like, well, have you visited a slaughterhouse lately? Why, no, you have not, have you? So now it's like, okay, meat comes from someplace. It was killed, and you can go and see where it was killed. It's kind of illegal to film inside slaughterhouses. They want to keep that a secret from the meat eaters and everyone. They want to keep that classified information, what goes on in slaughterhouses. So now I'm, more aware of that culture of cruelty and carnism. Melanie Joy's book on carnism, this sort of given that that we're in a meat-eating culture and that's the norm, and vegetarians or vegans of the heretics in that equation, sort of the heretics against the religion of meat consumption. So I'm pretty into vegetarianism and veganism as a philosophy, as an ethic, as a way to reduce methane in the atmosphere and reduce cardiovascular disease, and any number of good things come from being veg or vegan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you had mentioned previously, which I think about, eating meat. Nothing good can come of it.
Nothing good, nothing necessary. We're not in a famine society of scarcity, so we can choose how we get our protein, and we don't need to do what our ancestors did as hunter-gatherers. We're okay with choosing a plant-based diet.
Yeah.
So we can break that long chain of karma. I do see veganism as an evolution. The idea of buying strawberries in Anchorage, Alaska in January, that's, due to trade and transportation and all kinds of cool developments in the world. So yeah, I see veganism as part of our evolution and the future. Whereas scarcity is like, you got to eat whatever you can get your hands on. We're all going to starve if we don't. That's hunter-gatherer culture from long ago. We don't need to be. We hopefully are beyond that and can get away from the scarcity mentality. And we don't need to think about being in a famine and being desperate all of the time.
Yeah, I think there's a bit to that. Like, people asked, well, would you eat your dog? And the answer is, well, from, someone who eats meat, absolutely. If there was a famine and that was the only option, that's exactly what I would do.
Right.
Well, except that you do have other options. It's like you look at, a bunch of apples, maybe you have fruits and vegetables, and you're saying, no, I'd rather eat my dog.
Yeah. Who would
and
be like that, right? I mean, yeah. The Ted Nugents of Twitter come up with a lot of arguments. They're always hassling vegetarians and vegans, and all of a sudden carrots are sentient beings with feelings, and we need to care desperately, need to care about that. Meanwhile, if anyone just goes to a slaughterhouse or listen to that old Morrissey Smith tune from the 80s, meat is murder, just some sort of attention to where the meat comes from and get over these rationalizations, it would be great for the planet. People talk about free range. Well, if there was such a thing as free range cannibal meat, we wouldn't go for that. Free range humans, we would swoop down. The FBI, ATF would be on the scene, hopefully. So yeah, free range versus, is it dead? Yes. The meat is dead. So it came from an animal that seemed to have died. Whether it was free range, that doesn't seem to matter anymore. So people rationalize. But this is an interesting thing, I think. Carnism and the religion of meat, or meat as this given norm that we must somehow conform to, whether we, think about it or not. That's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? I mean, diet as something that we inherit, that was programmed into us at a young age without our consent, and for most without any thought going into questioning that. What if there are other subjects that are in the same kind of tyrannical territory? What about religion? What about any number of things? To me, veganism is just the tip of the iceberg. And anyone who is vegan is pretty courageous. They're getting out of Mystery Babylon. They're like exiting the Matrix, so to speak, in the area of diet. But what about other areas? We are programmed in terms of religion as well. And in so many ways, it's the same kind of raw deal as carnism, kind of a dictatorship or oppressive regime that says meat is what you will eat. End of story. You will go to this church. You will believe these things. You will, yes, terrifying. But veganism is just one of many possible topics that could be visited and seen as something we can question. And so someone who's Gnostic and vegan, wow, that's pretty radical. That's really turning your back on a lot of programming that's otherwise foisted upon us as we exit the womb and enter the world. Wow. To change religions is not an easy thing, is no small thing. Changing one's diet, no small thing. These are radical changes one is willing to make.
Yeah. which reminds me of Rumi, where they talk about between the valley of right and wrong, right? So you're outside of, right thinking and wrong thinking and just kind of being, right?
Mhm.
Where we have a defense mechanism built up about, that makes us right and other people wrong. And
Right.
we find it so hard to just think, maybe from above, right?
Yeah.
What we're doing.
Yeah. We're very tribal. Us and them, Pink Floyd, us and them. Uh, we seem to work that way. Us and them, our tribe versus another tribe. And that's why the aliens are not talking to us.
Yeah. And it's hard, to not defend, your beliefs and just consider all the beliefs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. The I think David Lane mentioned that when you interviewed him. There's a Jain term for, I forget the term, but it means looking at issues from different angles, different vantage points, to kind of see where everyone's point of view comes from, to look at an argument on all sides. Or in some sense, instead of the blind men feeling the elephant and saying it's like a trunk or it's like a leg or tail, you're kind of visiting all of the blind men and kind of taking note of what each experiences
Hmm.
and kind of emerging with a bigger picture. That's a cool teaching of Jainism.
Yeah. Or even, does the elephant even exist? Does it exist only in your mind?
Right. That's also a school of thought.
Um,
Yes. What's real? What's not? What's just a projection of our mind?
yeah. Or like to the extent that something exists physically, it exists in your mind, right? So it occurs for someone some way and another person another way, right?
Yes.
In terms of, the ego, it has to be right. And I think that there's association with death in not being right and having everything line up because,
Mm-hmm.
to move to a different vantage point or to go against your previous beliefs, part of you dies. Your old self dies to an extent that it's not the same collection of ideas and understanding,
Mm-hmm.
and we just have this fear of death. And
Right.
so
You have to be
it's a
right. Yes.
yeah, it's a self-defense, like in a real sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? That we need to be right because our lives are dependent on it, right?
Right.
The collection of who we are at this moment depends on it. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we can't look at it from another perspective or admit, that's not quite working, our old
Right.
self.
Yeah, it is all tied in together, which is why people don't change religions typically. You're messing with your eternal soul, your salvation. And of course, unfortunately, there are a lot of cults and very strict religions, very sectarian, hardline groups that play upon that and deliberately instill that in people's minds, beyond even what naturally might occur, and say, yeah, you will go out that door and you're losing God's protection and you're going to get cancer and bad things will happen. The negative will be unleashed upon you. And they deliberately play that up as a manipulation to keep those numbers growing, that everyone wants to grow. And that manipulation, that implied protection racket. Yeah. You don't want to be protected by us. You've got a nice life there. It would be a shame if something
Mhm.
would happen to it. Yeah. So that's the dark side of religion. I don't ever on my programs, I never talk about that kind of stuff too much, but there's a lot of terrible things that go on in the name of religion and religious sects and crazy people. When David Lane was your guest, he was talking about some crazy stuff that
Mm,
That was
yeah,
done to him breaking into his house to look
yeah,
around for documents and crazy stuff, you know?
yeah. That's weird. Was it the same guy that was like love bombing him, and then the love bombing didn't work, so he breaks into his house? Or am I conflating two
I
stories?
think that was probably true. Yeah, I think that's probably part of the history there. Um, yeah,
And that's such a metaphor for religion, isn't it? When the love bombing doesn't work.
yeah, love bombing doesn't work. We'll have to resort to other methods. Uh, and of course, not the Taliban. Well, they're pretty close actually. The Taliban blew up those Buddhist statues, one of the great wonders of the world. And the ISIS group, they would destroy Christian monasteries, including some of those I've been learning about when studying the Syriac saints. You know, in Mosul or in various Iraqi cities. You know, you have these Christian monastic libraries. There could be a copy of the Gospel of Thomas, or might have been a copy of the Gospel of Thomas in Syriac Aramaic. And here comes ISIS blowing things up and burning things down. And that's what they did. So, yeah, they're the ultimate example of that, destroying other people's religions, destroying other religions so they might feel more right
Mm-hmm.
about themselves. Uh, Very dangerous.
Yeah,
The burning of the Library of Alexandria, of course, is another one of those classic examples. Uh, yep, there's
yeah.
some interesting religions out there. There's kind of a mixed bag. I was actually watching a talk by someone the other night. I don't even remember what group it was. It was some sort of Christian vegetarian or vegan group, which to me is like, hey, these are interesting people.
Mm-hmm.
And but then I started, noticing some stuff about the flat Earth, and and some other
Really,
things.
yeah.
It's like, okay, well, I liked the veg part, but when it's like demonizing this group or that group, and not so much. It's like, darn, everything was looking good there for a while. We're going to keep the Sabbath, and we're going to be vegan, and might even check out, some apocryphal writings. Quote there from the book of First Enoch, very good, very, very good. But then, you start getting into some of the other culture wars stuff and flat Earth, even. And it's like, okay, all right,
They believed the Earth was flat.
yes,
Oh,
yes, they're flat earthers. In this particular case, they're flat earthers too. And it's like, oh well, I guess we can't have everything on the menu that we would like.
mm-hmm.
But cool that they're vegan and have got that part. So yeah, in a sense, most of the world religions, they all have, I mean, some things that are great. They all have some things very right, but they also may have things that are very, very wrong too. And it's a
Yeah.
mixed bag.
I've ran into on Facebook vegetarian Christians,
Yeah.
like a congregation,
Yeah,
right?
there are a lot. That's kind of a new thing, more and more.
Yeah.
At one time, it was only Ellen White and the Seventh Day Adventists in the 19th century. But yeah, nowadays, yeah, you may find vegan Christians, veg Christians. Uh,
And
that's
they're
whatnot.
defending, Paul's epistles where he talks about eat anything you want in the meat market and don't consider conscience, right?
Hmm.
Don't let your conscience worry about the meat market.
Right, right. Or meat
And
sacrificed to idols that came
yeah,
from some pagan temple.
yeah. And it, it's just like the stuff you have to do in your head to justify that, I think, where it's like he's telling you you can't eat meat in this and don't have a conscience when you're there is my understanding of it. And
Right.
just like you have the canon works and they seem to say exactly the opposite, right?
Right. Yeah,
And
Paul was saying that if you believe it's a sin, then for you it is. But if you think it's no big deal, then go ahead and buy the meat that had been sacrificed and used in some temple pagan ceremony. Okay. All right, Paul. But yeah, but then that's the real challenge, isn't it, to the veg Christian? Okay, Paul's epistles are in the canon, so you gotta try and so Marcion, with his attempt to kind of focus on the New Testament instead of the Hebrew scriptures, he was trying to separate out the demiurge from the compassionate father who doesn't want to drown anyone and is never in a bad mood and throws lightning bolts at the Israelites. They're trying to iron that. So Marcion tried to separate out the canon. And in other ways, Christian groups do that all the time, trying to bring together irreconcilable, demiurge kind of stuff with compassionate, all love kind of stuff. And it's quite a tap dance, isn't it, to try and get that to all fit using the same canon. And with Paul being part of, the Ebionites, some of them were anti-Paul. I think eventually some of them were pro-Paul, even though that is an utter contradiction, because at some point, it just became part of Orthodox Christianity that you like Paul's teachings, his epistles, and you're stuck with that, and you can't say no to Paul, so you try and reconcile your vegetarianism, and yet Paul is in your canon of scripture, like it or not. So yeah, that is a thing. It is intriguing that there are some vegetarian or vegan Christians that have opened up to the Apocrypha and other scriptures. That's sort of something I'm seeing more and more of. At one time, vegetarian Christians would be just the Seventh-day Adventists, and they would be following the same 66 Protestant books. And they didn't really have any awareness of apocryphal writings. And there's some cool pro-veg stuff in some of those apocryphal New Testament writings. And so some of them these days, I guess, are, but there's also the issue of, with the Christian, speaking of Christian veg and Christian vegan sects, some of them, or a lot of them, will embrace the Essene gospel of peace and the humane gospel. And those are just purely channeled, made up books. They say nice things, but they're not ancient texts. So I never use them. I never cite them because it's sort of like nuclear waste. If you want to convince people, including scholars, that John the Baptist was a vegetarian, you're only going to use ancient texts, ante-Nicene Father type writings, or Clementine literature, or early writings. You're not going to use a channeled book. Or something that made up in the middle of the 20th century, because people know that. If you look at the entry for the Essene Gospel of Peace at Wikipedia, the humane gospel of Jesus the Christ, or even that Gospel of Isa, the unknown life of Jesus the Christ, by Nicholas Natanovich, who claimed to have founded at a Tibetan monastery. And you talk to people at that monastery and they say, no, we've never had a book like that. completely made up. So yeah, you have to side with the scholars in those cases and say those are channeled writings. They say good things, of course, but they're not ancient vegetarian gospels. So yeah, but quite often those Christian groups will cite those texts. It's like it's like the flat earth thing. It's just, oh well. It's a lot to ask, I guess, a lot to process. But that's another issue with the Christian veg and vegan groups. They will embrace some texts that are problematic because they're not so into collecting these obscure texts that, like the Clementine homilies, they may not know about, I suppose. And other New Testament collections, and so they're not aware of Slavonic Josephus quoting John the Baptist as a plant eater. So it's just easy for someone to write this Essene Gospel of Peace, presenting this whole, trying to reinvent a lost gospel, so to speak. But it's just false, and real buzzkill that it's false, but nevertheless it is false. But that's one thing they trip over typically, the embracing the Essene gospel of peace, or the humane gospel. I can understand why those were written. They were trying to reinvent the lost gospel of the Hebrews. They're trying to snatch it out of the ethers and bring it back. I'm sympathetic with that need being fulfilled, that void being filled. But unfortunately, you have to do it through scholarly methods. There is a book that should be in the canon of Scripture. It's the book Disciples by Keith Akers. That's a book on the vegetarian that makes the case for the vegetarianism of the Jesus movement. What about the loaves and the fishes? What about the Gospels? Who wrote what? What about the Ebionite sayings of Jesus preserved in Islam? All of those good things. What about the Mandaeans? That is the best book, I think, on the vegetarianism of the Jesus movement that has ever been. It's in my canon, my personal loose leaf binder canon of Scripture, the Disciples by Keith Akers. That is really scholarly. And of course, he doesn't quote he's at his website, he talks about the Essene humane gospel and channeled writings and why he doesn't use them. So he's an interesting person. He's I think he's actually Buddhist, though. I don't think he's actually a Christian vegan, neo-Ebionite person. I think himself, he practices Buddhism these days. I don't think he found a Christian sect that he liked that was a veg sect, a vegan sect. Mm-hmm. So he went Buddhist. You can find at least some Buddhist vegans, but there's also meat-eating Buddhists too, so it's not easy sometimes to fit in.
Yeah. Yep. So, let's see, maybe we'll wrap up maybe with meditation tips I've never made it a practice personally. What would you do for quick meditation tips?
I have saved out on a page here somewhere.
Oh yeah.
A couple of public domain meditation practices that the non-initiate seeker of Satmat can adopt. This is from the book Spiritual Gems, a collection of letters by Huzur Baba Sawan Singh, who says, as to any exercises which might help you until the time of your initiation, I can only suggest at this time that you may sit in meditation in a quiet place, like your own bedroom or some room as secluded as possible, and with spine and body erect in a comfortable position. Fix all the attention at the center just back of the two eyes, and slowly repeat the word Radha Swami, fixing the mind on the Supreme Being who is your Supreme Father. That's Sawan Singh's public domain meditation practice. Mm-hmm. Just sitting quietly and repeating the word Radha Swami, which is a sacred name in Sant.
What does it mean?
It means Lord of the Soul.
Lord of the Soul.
Yep. It is also a term for the eighth plane. So it's a very high holy name in Satmat.
You need to say it in whatever language that's in, not in English?
Radha Swami is Hindi, and is a play on words from, like Radha Krishna. Swami, of course, these are all Indian terms that go back to Sanskrit. Mm-hmm. It just means Lord of the Soul or Soul Lord. And there's a term from the Book of Enoch called Lord of Spirits, which is really close Radha-swami, from the book of First Enoch.
Mhm.
Yeah, Lord of the Soul, Soul Lord, that is a public domain, or it's not a secret mantra, but a public domain mantra. And anyone who uses that word, I think, is in a pretty good place. I mean, that alone, Sawan's public domain meditation leaves a lot else in the dust already. It's really quite good.
So Radhaswami isn't one of the 5 names.
No.
There we go. So we have a little bit of hint there at the 5 names that this isn't one of them. So if you're checking off names
Right.
right now, watching this, you can check that that's not one of them. So it's like a
Right. But it's so easy to get initiated in Satmat. It's much easier. You don't have to convert to Islam. You don't have to convert to Sikhism. You don't have to learn, convert to Christianity and learn about holidays and all this, So I think even though it may seem kind of difficult to become vegetarian, compared to converting to a different religion like Judaism or Islam or Christianity just to qualify for the good stuff, the secret teachings hidden away for those who are, card-carrying members. I mean, that's really hard. I mean, I can't imagine converting to a religion and learning the customs and the rituals and all this. So to me, Satmat seems easier to access than learning to join a Sufi order in which you have to convert to Islam just to say hi and just to get through the door.
Mhm.
As to which Sufi order to join, where the juice is still flowing, beats the heck out of me. I've been studying this for a long time, and I wouldn't know, where to go anyway. Once you convert, who do you talk to? Which Sufi order is it going to be? I don't know, what they're going to tell you, if anything. So it seems tough converting to a different religion just to get to the esoteric inner circle. Wow, that's real work. Satmat is easy compared to that.
Yeah. Do you see Satmat as a religion?
I have no problem with the word religion. I know some have sort of like wanted to distance themselves and just call it spirituality. But I like reclaiming words like religion. Mysticism for some is this dark word too, where like people are dressed in black robes and holding black candles and chanting something very menacing sounding, intimidating. And it's, but I like the word mysticism. I like the word mystic. So I just take back these words and just kind of reclaim them. So yeah, religion to me is fine. Anyone who has a God concept believes in an afterlife, yeah, it's a religion. I'm pretty okay with that. But what people I think mean by not wanting to use the word religion is they might be wanting to learn about a mystical path and a spiritual practice, and not just simply, feast days or ritual or learning how to sing hymns in a different language or something, really boring like that. That dryness, that Sunday school, that ritual holiday kind of thing, that may be what they mean by religion. Whereas, out of body travel, that's a different thing from what they would associate with religion. At least they don't teach that around here. I've actually written articles before. I was looking for the Church of Meister Eckhart at the corner of Main and Union. I looked in the yellow pages for the Church of the Mystic Light. Couldn't find it, couldn't find it. You have to dig deeper or look further to the east. Kept looking in the yellow pages for that mystic Christian church of the cool kids and the out of body travelers, and tough, not easy to find. Not easy to find those guys back from the Middle Ages. Yep. So yeah, when people use the word religion or think of it as a negative word, I think they just mean dryness, rituals, rules and regs, phobic in some way or against one group or another, or racist or something bad and discriminatory, something negative rather than spiritual, something other than spiritual. But to me, it's all supposed to be at least interchangeable: religion, spirituality, mysticism.
Yeah. So we're sitting, in a chair, comfortable, spine is straight.
Spine would be straight.
And you're saying Radhaswami.
Very slowly in your mind, mentally, as a mental chant.
How slowly? Like Radha, like that?
I think that's good. Kind of singing it mentally singing it. Yeah. So you're feeling the vibration of the vowels. Sure, that sounds great.
And you're not doing it in your head, you're doing it out loud?
You're doing it in your mind, mentally singing, mentally chanting in your mind. It is okay to sing the word Radhaswami out loud a little bit for a few minutes if you need to start your meditation that way, if it helps you to focus a little bit or settle down. But yeah, it's basically a mental practice. So you repeat this name very slowly, and it can be at intervals. It doesn't have to be, back to back. It could be like Radhaswami, pause for a minute, Radhaswami again. And that's a mighty good beginning to any practice. Mm-hmm. There's some public domain, and I can email these to anyone interested. There are some public domain meditation instructions from Kirpal Singh, which are a bit more detailed about inner light, seeing inner light. I could email both of these to anyone who wants them. These convenient method instructions, or Jyoti light meditation instructions. Kirpal Singh said, meditation is the process of withdrawing the attention from the world outside and focusing it at the seat of the soul, in the body, behind and between the eyebrows. This point is known as the inner eye, third eye, single eye, Shiv Netra, or Tishra Til. And then he says, sit in one pose and move not your head, limbs, or eyes. Sit straight but relaxed with no tension in the body below. Close your eyes as in sleep and look sweetly, lovingly, intently into the middle of the darkness lying in front of you. You will see a dark veil. That which sees the dark veil within without the help of your physical eyes is the inner eye. And then he says, those who are initiated repeat the 5 charged words one by one, very slowly, mentally, internally, at intervals, so that your inner eye is not disturbed. Those who have not been initiated just sit in sweet remembrance of God, repeating with the tongue of thought any name of God or saint which you hold dear. So, for Sawan saying that was Radhaswami, that's where he would use the word Radhaswami. As you look within, you will see a sky or blue sky. If you look minutely into it, you will find it studded with stars, or you may see pinpoints of light. If so, try to locate the big star out of them and fix your whole attention on that. And so that's a sample from his introductory meditation instruction. So you're just staring at that veil of darkness, waiting for the points of light.
And it'll become blue?
Could become blue, or some other vision of light or flash of light, and you just look in the middle and keep focusing while repeating the sacred name that you have adopted for this practice, whether it's Radhaswami or some other name. And that's a good introduction, kind of a preview, if you will, of Satmat. The Satmat initiation, of course, provides a lot more detail and steps and stages, but it all begins with the repetition of a sacred name while concentrating at the third eye center. and gazing into the darkness. That is treating the body as being the true temple of the spirit, the third eye as being the door inside this temple. And the act of worship is gazing into the darkness and contemplating any light that you might see. That is being in the temple. Yeah, I like that. What's the Jewish holy day? Atonement, at one-ment, where it's just the high priest in the Holy of Holies in the Temple of Jerusalem. That's everyone. That's each soul is that. Just alone with God in the Holy of Holies, inside the temple. And that is meditation, I think, illustrated by a holiday.
Yeah.
The Sabbath, too, actually, a true rest from your physical labor, from days of work. The true Sabbath is meditation also, transcending the creation in order to experience the Creator. That's the true Sabbath.
Yeah. Now I'm going to do that, I think, and see what happens. And, maybe, I'll hear the 5 names while I'm there. So, or do people ever do that? Is that how is there any?
I've never heard of anyone getting the 5 names that way. But initiation is fairly easy to come by, applying for initiation. Sant is organized into different schools of thought. So there's different, as with Sufi orders, ancient Gnostic orders, and others, there's many different masters, different schools of Sant to choose from. And you check those out, and you may be drawn to a certain teacher. And initiation is pretty easy to come by.
Yeah. Is there any story about how the 5 names were obtained?
Yeah, I've written an article on that. I've written an article called "The Origins of Satmat: The 5 Names," and Tulsi Sahib's Guru. Yeah, it's a little booklet I wrote that David Lane published in his Sachkhand journal. Getting kind of hoarse from talking, I guess.
Well, I already said we were winding down, but what's the executive summary on the origin of the 5 names?
Those go back to Kabir, the Kabir Panth.
Yeah.
Going back to the Middle Ages.
And so I wonder if is it essentially it worked for them and they said, okay, give these a go?
They had to begin at some point, didn't they? Yeah, at some point in time. They they were around after the 10th century. Goraknath, the yogi Goraknath and the Nath yogis.
Gotcha.
No coffee, but I am coughing.
Well, here maybe that's we're talked out here. Any point you wanted to make or anything you wanted to say?
People can email me if they want the meditation instructions. James at spiritualawakeningradio.com.
Yeah.
I can see the Sawan Singh introductory meditation and the Kirpal Singh introductory meditation instructions. Yeah. Not secret, not classified at all. That's all public domain. I have that on my blog and posted at Facebook from time to time. Linked at Twitter now and then, maybe Tumblr and Instagram too.
Yeah, fantastic.
Then, people can try it out and see, kind of get a sense of what it's like to access the third eye center. and go within, using a sacred name to concentrate with, and gazing into the darkness, waiting for the light to appear. And that is the beginning of the introductory meditation, and Satmat, regular meditation, starts off that way too. It's like getting to the third eye. That's the beginning of the path.
Yeah, very good. So yeah, I'm going to try it, and happy meditating.
Yes, it's a lifelong quest and beyond, where we are expanding our consciousness into that magical world of inner space. And it is an inner space that has been described, experienced by countless others before. So it's like going to Antarctica and seeing what's there, or, it's like something that humans have done and continue to do. It's a rare thing. Most people aren't aware of. I think some of the groups have kept their mystical side secret because it sounds really way out there. Like Eastern Orthodoxy has the noetic heavens and the same inner light kind of descriptions in their writings, like the Philokalia, St. Isaac of Nineveh, the Sufis. But it's always been kind of secret. I think with the near-death experience books being published, that was kind of a legalization of mysticism in our particular culture. Life After Life, Kenneth in Raymond Moody and the books by Kenneth Ring and others talking about near-death experiences have kind of opened people's minds up a bit in our culture, whereas in previous generations, these folks would just be shunned as heretics, or worse still, locked away, filed away in the insane asylum of past abuse, where we put people or accused of heresy in the Middle Ages. So I think that's one reason why some of these teachings were secret. They seemed kind of way out there, tunnels of light and ascension of the soul. But I think these days more people are into that or open to that idea than in earlier times. And so, maybe it will become less and less secret in the future as more people get into exploring inner space, that it's all within. But it also requires discipline of the mind. And that's why it's more appealing. A lot of people would rather take, LSD or something, take a pill, get there instantaneously. Of course, the experience isn't necessarily the same. But it's easier to press a button or take some substance, I suppose. But meditation, it's probably not for everyone. But it is the way to get there from here, to change one's consciousness, to access the divine right here, right now, today. No need to wait for second comings and dispensations and, all of this, the usual future tense talk of religions. It's a present tense reality that it's buried within, that needs to be uncovered. And so meditation is a way to get to access it, to look within instead of looking without. That alone also is a pretty radical thing. It's like the first fish that decided to beach itself, back at the early days of evolution, to go to this new land. And that's what we're doing. We're just beaching ourselves in a different place of consciousness, and growing into that, exploring that realm, that new realm.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you so much. Very enlightening.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And it's nice to also be able to include the Gnostic talk and apocryphal side, because that's my background before I found Satmat. I was one of those Nag Hammadi people just pondering those texts. And it's great that there are YouTube channels. I watch a lot of the same ones that you do, the myth visions and the Gnostic informants and some of these channels. And it's nice to see this stuff hashed out about Q and Gospel of Thomas and even a couple of shows on the vegetarianism of the Jesus movement have appeared. So at one time, no one talked about these things at all. So we're in a golden age of discussion at YouTube with no limits whatsoever. That never used to be. Never used to be a thing. If you read the Nag Hammadi, there was no commentary. No one wrote a book trying to explain what it meant. Just a bunch of weird sayings, weird passages in some book that no one knows about. So it's getting better these days. We've got it easy compared to someone who reached on to a bookstore shelf in 1977 for the Nag Hammadi Library in English, edited by James M. Robinson, first edition, published 1977. You were on your own if you bought that book at a bookstore back then. No one to talk to. Nobody whatsoever. No one. Yep. No internet, no groups to join, no study group, no nothing. Just you and your book going insane in solitude, thinking that you're some kind of crazy, weird person. And now you can join with others. And maybe you're not crazy after all. You're just another stranger in a strange land, another Alleghenies.
Yeah, for sure. Or maybe we're all crazy. And maybe that's the point, right?
Yeah. Freedom to choose our state of consciousness. Choose our religion and our diet as well.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you made it to the end here, feel free to like and subscribe. If you want to bash the like button or subscribe or both. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Very good. And happy meditating.
Namaste.